Just letting everyone know there's no super chats today, guys. No super chats. I sincerely appreciate everyone that has done super chats consistently, like every single week. You guys are absolutely amazing. But I got to thinking about it, and number one, the live streams were just taking me way too long. And number two, I thought, a lot of the people come and they do like a $10 or $20 super chat every single weekend. And I thought, if you're one of those people, you'd just be far better off just subscribing to Rebel Capitalist Pro, because you're going to get way more value in Rebel Capitalist Pro than you are by asking me a super chat here and there. So we're live on that. Just for those of you who don't know, it's the product I created with Lynn Alden and Chris McIntosh. So they've got their research, and then we've got live Q&As with Chris. We do one every Thursday, with Lynn every other Tuesday when they come out with their most recent research. And then we've got this forum, and it's just amazing. I've been in the forums over the last week or so, and the quality of content from the actual members is staggering. I didn't realize, to be honest with you, prior to setting up the product, that the forum would be so valuable from a standpoint of pure content. I knew it would be valuable because you can network and get some questions answered, but the depth of insider information is really surprising. I just quickly went back and forth with a couple guys. One guy was in the nuclear power business, so he was giving a lot of the members insights on uranium. And then another gentleman that just joined, I noticed, has been in the gold business for like 30 years. So anyway, if you guys want to check that out, just go to georgegammon.com/pro. And I'll just reiterate that at the end of the live stream. One more thing I want to say, guys, before we get going, is I've just been listening to this weekend's podcast with the investors, with TIP, this one. And guys, I'm telling you, yesterday, well, they made it live yesterday. They interviewed Lynn Alden, who of course is one of my partners in Rebel Capitalist Pro. And this is the best podcast I've ever listened to. And I'm not saying like the podcast is, well, let me show it here again. The podcast is fantastic, but I'm talking about this episode. This episode is ridiculous. I mean, it is so good. I'm sitting there listening to it prior to the live stream when I'm getting a bite to eat. And it's with Lynn. It came out yesterday. You guys, you have to listen to this. I mean, you absolutely have to listen to this. Lynn just knocks it out of the park. She is incredible. She's just upping her game every single week. She's just phenomenal. So as soon as you guys get done with the live stream, if you've got some time, go to your favorite podcast platform, download Rebel Capitalist Show, of course. But after you do that, listen to this episode of TIP with Stig and Preston and Lynn from yesterday. It's 303, just came out yesterday. It'll blow your mind. You guys, trust me. Check it out. You'll thank me later. Okay. Now let's get in. Excuse me. Let's get into some questions here. I'm going to try to manage this on my own. No Sebastian today. We'll see how I do. So we'll start off here. Emil is getting ready. Coffee. Great. Let's see. Oh, and guys, if you do have some questions, please, since I'm going through the live chat for this, make sure you start with question all in capitals or bold or something like that, so I can see it right off the bat. So you got Mike asks, George, if you could recommend a single book on the topic of investing, what would it be? I recently read Richest Man in Babylon. It was great. Would love something new to read. Boy, just one? I'd say Market Wizards. Intelligent Investor would be up there, but Market Wizards and the original one. I think Jack Schwager did 3 of them, But the original Market Wizards, that's the one with Jim Rogers. That's what I'd recommend. It's basically interviews, Mike, where Jack is highly knowledgeable himself, but he interviews all these fantastic, amazing traders and investors, so you can really start to understand not only their process, but more importantly, their mentality. And I think that's just absolutely crucial to understand. And I don't know of a book that does it better than Market Wizards. Okay, Jay asks thoughts on best way or experts who can help to invest in automation AI. I'm not sure. That's a good question, Jay. Automation AI. I don't know, just because I'm just kind of an old school. I mean, for me personally, as you guys have heard me say many times, commodities are cheap, really cheap, very, very cheap right now. So I'm kind of more focused on the knuckle dragger investments, if you want to call them that. Not that I'm opposed to AI or automation. I'm not sure, Jay. I don't want to give you an answer because it wouldn't be an educated one. Okay, Cookie Boy asks, how will U.S. react if Biden wins election? Well, I'm not sure how the U.S. will react, but I don't see the stock market going up because taxes are going up just regardless. As now, maybe income taxes won't go up if Trump gets reelected, but property taxes, sales tax, I mean, you can pretty much bank on the fact that in most states, taxes will be going up. But if Biden gets in, then you're going to get, oh boy, I would say you're going to get income going back up to probably 39 or whatever it was with Obama. I would say cap gains tax probably goes to income. And I would say there's probably going to be a wealth tax. But the probabilities, I think, are highest with the highest marginal rate going back to where it was with Obama, and cap gains being taxed at income, and corporate taxes going up, which translates back into the market because the market's priced to more than perfection. So one of the big reasons that the market moved so much over the past few years is because of the tax cuts. So if there's no more cuts, if there's tax hikes, then that cuts right into profits. Although that said, the stock market, of course, really is detached from pretty much all fundamentals whatsoever. But that's going to be your cross currents there to consider. Richard, just to let you know that we turned the super chats off today, so no super chats today. I don't know. Yeah, E-Money says, what will happen to gold, silver stocks if Biden wins? I don't know. I'm not sure that would be a big driver, just because whether it's Biden or Trump, the bottom line is they're going to be printing massive amounts or they're going to be spending a lot of money. M2 is going to continue to really skyrocket, in my opinion. So, I mean, Trump, Biden, both parties are the parties of big government now. Let's just be honest. Whether it's Republicans or Democrats, they both want huge deficits. They both want massive government intervention. They want huge spending programs. So it's, I mean, pick your poison. Okay. Yep, Jay's just, yeah, you got it, Jay. Excuse me. Jay's just talking about how super chats are turned off. Okay, Paul asks, please, may I have one specific investment play where I can buy inexpensive, where you are, maybe where you are looking to sell expensive later. I cannot buy in the Midwest real estate or move to Columbia. Well, Paul, I would look at commodities, my friend, and put things on a watch list, guys. That's what I do. So I just kind of look at what I'd like to buy, and I got this to my from my sister, actually, kind of, so hat tip to her. But that's what she started doing like 5 years ago. Is she would just put things on a list that she wanted to buy, regardless of whether it was cheap or expensive. And then she'd just wait. If it ever got cheap, she'd buy it. So that's kind of what I like to do as well. But I like to focus on things that I think are kind of currently cheap, and then wait for them to be at a good price. So I like the oil producers, all the stuff that I've talked about in my videos in the past. You know, the coal producers, the oil producers, I know Chris was talking about a soil ETF that was interesting. I'm kind of putting that on my radar. But anything that you can kind of look for in agriculture, I think, and again, make sure it's not expensive. You're just putting it on a watch list, right? You only buy it when it's cheap. But I think also, too, if we get a second wave of the cerveza sickness, or a first wave in some states, however you want to look at it, and regardless of whether you want to buy into it being real or it's a hoax or whatever, that really doesn't matter for markets, because if the media is coming out with it, if the numbers are going up, the market is going to take that into consideration. So there could be some opportunity here in the next few months to buy things cheap, or maybe even cheaper than they were in March. So it's all about just being patient and just executing a game plan minus emotion and ego, and with the emphasis more on just a process. Okay, keep going down here. Okay, trying to let's see if we could get the problem with this live chat is it's about, when we use StreamYard, it's like a minute lag, so it's a little tough here. I think I'm at the bottom of it. Okay, Birkin said silver is a great opportunity. Yeah, I like silver, but on the speculative side of my portfolio, I like to break my portfolio down into insurance, physical gold, and then investments. It's got to pay me to own it, and then 10% was speculation. And I like silver for that, but I like the gold miners quite a bit too. Okay, Taco Negro question. Now 50 years old, house hacked, homes in BC, ski town, and Southeast Asia. Very cool. Very cool. Surfing Southeast Asia, 750K non-real estate. Gold, silver, equities, cash. What currency to hold? 4-year cash? I don't know why you're holding the cash. I mean, are you holding it just for short-term liquidity? If that's the case, I'd probably go into just T-bills and roll them over really fast. If you want just cash to park in a bank for the next 10 years, I'd probably go with Singapore dollars if I had to pick one. I mean, I'd diversify it, so I had a few. But if I had to just pick one, I'd probably do Singapore dollars out of those that you listed. Okay, Ishmael asks, what do you do with 100 grand? Well, it's the same old process, buddy. You just break it down into 10, 80, 10, and buy 10,000, at least is what I would do. I'd buy 10,000 in gold. I'd take 10,000 for speculation. And I like the miners, like I said. You might want to think about Bitcoin, maybe silver. There's a few, uranium. I bought that back in March as well as a speculation. There's a lot of speculations out there, but again, I like to buy them cheap. You still focus on that. And then I do 80%'s got to pay me to own it. So you could take 80 grand and buy a nice rental property. Don't have to buy it right now. Just be patient. Let the market come to you. We could see the market go down a little bit, in which you could get that cash flow quite a bit cheaper. Maybe dividend stocks, something like that. That's how I'd start with 100K. Okay, Sheila asks, hi, about Brazil's economy, European banks. Next previous. Not sure I'm following that one, Sheila. Oh, here we go. A question, the Surf Project. Can you explain how QE eventually causes long-term rates to increase and what it would take for a new rate cycle to start? I don't know if we could say that it causes long-term rates. It has in the past, but I don't know if there's a causal effect there, more of a correlation. So, and I think what you're doing, Surf Project, is you're going back and you're looking at a chart of quantitative easing relative to like the yield on the 10-year. Long-term rates to go up. Yeah. So what we've seen when they did QE 1, 2, and 3 is rates on the 10-year actually went up, not down, which is very counterintuitive because people think that if the Fed comes in and starts buying, creating more demand for those treasuries, then the rates will actually go down. Prices go up with more demand. But that didn't happen. The opposite happened. So I talked to Jeff Snyder about this actually. And he's, according to Jeff, which obviously I follow what he says. I mean, he is the pro of the pros. He's the top of the top. That is for sure. He says that this most likely happened because the market saw quantitative easing as something that would create inflation, that would be inflationary. So because the market sees that as inflationary, you get a bigger sell-off in the market than the additional demand that the Fed is creating by going in and doing QE itself. So you still have rates rise. And that was his, the way he looked at it. So again, I want to make sure that you're not under the assumption that just because the Fed does QE, the long-term rates will go up. They can go down. It depends on how much demand they create and how much supply is created by people who think there's going to be additional inflation actually selling into the market. There's definitely a supply-demand equation there you have to think through, but it has been correlated in the past. What would it take for a new rate cycle to start? Well, normally inflation expectations, but then we've got to look at the Fed pegging the yield curve with yield curve control. I think that's coming. And I think you'll have a situation just like you had in the 1940s where they pegged it, meaning they just bought as many treasuries as they needed to make sure that the interest rate on the 10-year, 30-year, or even on the short end of the curve didn't go up past a certain amount, and they just kept it right there. And so if you look at the 1940s, inflation ran really hot. In fact, the 1940s, there were some years where inflation was quite a bit higher than what we saw in the 1970s. So that's kind of how I see it playing out. And I think that's what they're going to do to try to get the inflation they need to reduce the burden of debt for the government. The question then becomes, how do they produce inflation? And I think it's going to be through fiscal spending and helicopter money, what we've seen over the past couple months. And we know that the Republicans are game. And I think the Democrats, especially if Biden gets in, are definitely going to be game to continue to extend helicopter money through not just additional unemployment benefits or quote unquote stimulus, but I think they're just going to go straight into UBI and whatever they call it. It's just going to be something more permanent. which then you've got to ask yourself, okay, how does that play into the stock market? That could raise the stock market to even higher levels, because we know for sure that a lot of these people that got stimulus checks recently, they took those stimulus checks, set up a Robinhood account, and went right into buying bankrupt Hertz or Nikola or Tesla or whatever. I mean, Ford, you name it. So how would that play out if people were getting stimulus checks every single month? And to take it to another extreme, I don't know if you guys watched my video on, I think it was not last week, but the week prior, that I did on hyperinflation. And I talked about the Fed having the people download a Fed app. I called it the Freedom app because every single thing the government names actually has the opposite of when it plays out. It does the opposite of its actual name. So I called it the Freedom app. But you just download the Freedom app to your phone, and that's straight from the Fed or straight from the Treasury, and they just magically appears the $1,000 or $2,000 on your Freedom app every single month. And what they could do is they could just simply program that digital currency to expire at a specific time. So let's say every single month, everyone gets $1,000 of Fed coins, or I think a better term for that would be Orwells, like my buddy Eric Townsend with Macro Voices calls them. So you get your 1,000 Orwells on your phone every single month, but the government or the Fed, whoever programs your Freedom app, programs it so those 1,000 currency units, whatever you want to call them, expire in 30 days. You have to spend them in 30 days or else, poof, they're gone. And then if they don't get velocity or inflation up high enough, then they just take it from 30 days to 15 days, maybe to 5 days, right? So they have a way, and I don't know if that would be legal, but right now, I mean, let's be honest, the Fed isn't even considering what's legal. I mean, if you want to think, it's like the government, you think that they look at the Constitution? Like, are you kidding me? Like, almost everything they do is unconstitutional. And the Fed, almost everything they've done over the last couple of months is completely illegal when you look at the Federal Reserve Act, especially if you look at the spirit of the Federal Reserve Act. So they're just completely ignoring laws and rules. So that's why I think that this is that thing I was talking about is kind of the next step. Now, whether we get there in a month or 3 years, I mean, who knows? But I think that's coming down the pipe for sure. Okay. All right, let's see. This thing's kind of taking a long time. Have you heard? Oh, Banks is okay, guys. Do we have any more questions here? Let me go back up and see if I missed some. Oh, here we go. Adam asks, if we have inflation higher than interest rates like the 1940s, should we try to borrow more money? If you can borrow it productively and get a fixed rate, Adam, then you might want to consider it, depending on what your skill set or skill sets are. So let me give you an example of what not to do using real estate. So I would not suggest going out and borrowing money on an adjustable rate mortgage to buy a property, let's say in California, that had a negative cash flow every single month. So you've got a negative carry. And the only way that you're going to make money is if you get some substantial inflation and prices go up, price appreciation and whatnot. That is what not to do. Do not do that. But using real estate as another example, let's say that you find a super awesome deal in a linear market where you can get a 1% RV ratio and you have $300 or $400 a month in positive cash flow, and it's in a great neighborhood. It's a starter home, so you don't have to stress out a lot over if you're going to have a renter that can afford to pay rent. There is that possibility that you might not, but the risk is a lot lower with that type of real estate purchase. And then you're buying the asset with 30-year fixed rate mortgage. Fixed rate is the key there. Then you're basically pocketing the spread between the rate of inflation and the interest rate you're paying the bank. It's a transfer of wealth from the bank or the lender to you, the borrower. But the key there is you've got some nice positive cash flow, and you're in a good neighborhood. You're buying an asset where there's most likely going to be a lot of demand for it moving forward, regardless of what happens with the economy or and not only that, but you're getting a renter in there that you want. You go into some of these C areas and even some of the B areas, and you don't want to deal with those renters. So go in a nice A neighborhood and get a great asset where you'd like to live yourself, but a nice starter home. That's key as well. And so that's the difference there. And you can extrapolate that example and use it for stocks, but see, with stocks, you're not going to be able to get a fixed rate mortgage. Yeah. I'd probably only suggest taking out debt for real estate to lock in that interest rate, as long as it's everything I talked about. Oh, Atlas. Okay, this is a really good question. Hey, George, rents in, I think it's pronounced Numio, isn't it? Okay, we'll call it Numio. For Medellin, super cheap. Are rental yields in Poblado much higher than the average rent to get a 2% rent to value? Well, I don't know if you're getting 2%. Like, I'd have to look at my RV ratio that I got on my last rental here. I don't know. Maybe it was, I don't know if it was 2%. I know it was over 1%, but I don't know it was 2. That would be, I'd have to review my math. But anyway, the bottom line is it's great. It's a great RV ratio that I'm getting down here. So yes, the rents in Medellin are dramatically different, depending on where you are. And if you're not just in Poblado, you got to remember, Poblado is a lot like Scottsdale, if you guys are familiar with Arizona or Phoenix, and that there's even parts of Poblado, Scottsdale, that are really nice, but there's parts that are like that really demand a premium. They're in super, super, super high demand based on the location to places like Parque Aris, the Golden Mile. Golden Mile is the financial district, or Parque Aris is kind of the big tourist spot with all the restaurants, the bars, cafes, shops. So if you can get an awesome place that's been, and then another thing that you got to remember, is that remodeled or is that just old school Colombian? Like if you're getting it, even in Poblado or even in a nice area, if you're just getting an apartment that's just old school Colombian, I mean, it's gonna be really tough to, even if it's furnished, to get, I don't know, maybe $1,200 a month, something like that. And that's another key point, that you're looking at unfurnished apartments on Numio, where I do furnished apartments. And why? Because you get a much, much higher RV ratio. Even the apartment that the most recent one that we rented, we were getting $2,500 US per month on that. If that would have been unfurnished, maybe 15, maybe now, yeah, not, I was going to say 1,700, but probably not. Probably 1,500 a month on that. And if that apartment would have been would not have been remodeled, then you're looking at 800-900 a month. And then if that apartment wouldn't have been in where it is in Poblado, if it would have been in other areas of Poblado, you're looking at maybe 700 a month. If you're looking at Sabaneta or even Envigado, which is a suburb that's just connected to or very close to Poblado, now you're looking at 400 or 500. So it's really, you got to know what you're doing here in Medellin. I always say that. It's a very inefficient market. It's way, way, way more inefficient than the United States. And that's going to do one of two things. If you know what you're doing, you're going to be able to make a lot more money, even as a percentage of your total return, than you would in the United States or a more efficient market. But if you don't know what you're doing, you're going to get your butt handed to you. You could get lucky, but I mean, literally 9 out of 10 investors that I see come down, the gringos from the States or from Canada or Europe or any place like that, they just come in and I see it just constantly. They fly in, they get excited because of something they see on the internet or some website, and they get down here. They think it's going to be like the MLS, where they can just pick out a rental property and everything that is for sale is listed right there on the MLS. And then their agent is just going to take them to all the available properties, and they're just going to pick one. And they do that. They come down here for 2 weeks and they just get smoked because number one, maybe 20% of the properties are online. And the other 80%, how do they sell them? And I'm not joking when I say this. I'm not exaggerating. The only way they sell them is go right over to their window and put a for sale sign in the window. That's it. That's it. No MLS, no nada. And sometimes they're on the 30th floor. So you can't even see the for sale sign. It's crazy. It's nuts. But that's how you get the deals. And here especially, you got to make your money on the buy side. I buy at a massive, massive discount to even what a retail Colombian buyer would buy for. So, but let alone a gringo that's coming down here that's paying a 40% markup. So again, you get my point. It's huge opportunity, but you got to know what you're doing. Okay. Cho Fo Show. Cho Fo Show. That's a great username. Funny. If you see inflation coming, do you still not recommend buying real estate in a cyclical market? Oh no. I live in one and don't want to be priced out. I wouldn't buy real estate in a cyclical market, because it's always going to be cheaper to rent, almost, unless we have a real downturn. So what you're saying is, in your own mind, you're saying, okay, well, if we're going to get a lot of inflation, that means real estate prices are never, ever, ever going to go down in nominal terms. So I'm just going to go ahead and buy now. That's not I wouldn't suggest thinking of it that way, because it can go down in real terms. And so therefore your wages basically go up. So it would still be cheaper relative to your wages to hold off. But I don't know that I'd buy in a cyclical market unless it was just massively depressed like it was back in 2012. Then it's a good opportunity. But if it's not like a crash, in a cyclical market, the only time I would buy is if nobody wants to buy. If you mentioned to your friends at let's say you guys go out to coffee or you're at dinner or something like that, or you're grabbing a few drinks or something, and you mention to your friends that you're thinking about buying, and they all tell you, what dude, what are you talking about? You're insane. You're just flushing money down the toilet. Are you crazy? You don't want to buy real estate right now. Dude? And they have like this intervention. Yeah, you got to get control, man. I think you've had one too many shots. That's when you buy. Seriously, that's when you want to think about buying. If you go to the bar with your buddies and you're saying, oh man, I'm thinking about buying a property. Oh, dude, yeah, so am I. Congratulate. Yeah, I know. Like we got to. Like my buddy just cashed in. I mean, he just made $100,000 on a property. Yeah, I got to get in. I mean, this is a great time to buy. Oh boy, yeah. I think that's a fantastic idea. Maybe we should go in on it together. Maybe we should buy a rental property together. Or yeah, I'm thinking about buying too. Or yeah, I just had this conversation with my wife. I think we're thinking about buying. That's when you do not want to buy. Those are the people you want to sell to. Especially, my point is, especially if you're in a cyclical market. So if the prices are high, I think if you do the math, it's cheaper to rent and then take that money you would have had for a down payment and put it into a linear market and buy a rental property. If you work the math on that, you're going to come out ahead, in my opinion. Not really my opinion. It's pretty much straight math. So it's not really my opinion. Okay. Shoot. Sorry, guys. This thing. Dang it. This thing went all the way down on me. Okay, Mark. Okay, Mark. Mark, try to answer the question once, buddy. Mark is monopolizing the live stream here, but let me answer this for you. Thank you for being on, Mark. I appreciate it, and thank you for being so enthusiastic. George, please respond. Okay, I definitely win, buddy. Hi, George. I am placing my 5-unit rental in Vallejo. Yeah, I know Vallejo well. I actually used to live in Marin, Mark, so I know that area. On the market, I'm afraid too much supply come up on the market. I wonder how much normal market time I have until I'm. Are you talking about maybe the market going down, Mark? I'm afraid too much supply come onto the market. I wonder how much normal market time. Okay, I'm not totally following this, but what I'm assuming you're asking is you've got a 5-unit rental. You're afraid of more supply coming online. So you're just wondering how long prices will stay at their current levels until the additional supply that you're assuming is going to come online will drive prices down. I really can't answer that question for you, Mark, specifically. What I can tell you is that real estate usually takes quite a while to turn, because you've got the sellers are always thinking about the comps from the prior month or 6 months or whatever, thinking that their property is worth that. So they're kind of looking in the rearview mirror, where the buyers are looking ahead. They're looking through the windshield, if you will. And that's what my buddy Jason Hartman always says. He says that the sellers are always looking in the rear view mirror, and the buyers are always looking through the windshield. I think that's a good way to look at it. So it takes a long time for those buyers to come to the realization that it takes a long time for those sellers to come to the realization that they're most likely not going to get their price, and therefore drop until finally the buyer's expectations and the seller's willingness to sell at that price come in line. If you go back to 2006 and 2007, when we were in the last housing bubble, you see that prices didn't bottom until 2012. It took 6 years. So the real estate market is much more slow to respond. It's like a giant ship that's you're trying to do a U-turn with the Titanic. And it doesn't just bam happen overnight. Usually. Now, that said, you could have got caught up in 2009 type scenario where there's just no buyers, just none. So nothing's trading, nothing going back and forth. So you didn't see the prices fall dramatically, but they would have if you had to fire sell. And I'm kind of seeing that right now in Puerto Rico. What I'll do is I'll go on Zillow and I'll look in an area where I'm considering purchasing, and I like 5 out of 10 properties I pull up, it shows like $50,000 reduction, $75,000 reduction, and that's when you know that the seller's expectations are starting to come to reality. And so that's kind of what I'd look for in your market as far as our prices dropping. And I would talk to my real estate agent and say, hey, are people dropping their prices yet? What's going on? But usually it takes a long time. So if you want to sell, put it on the market right now. If you're worried about it, just drop the price by 5% or 3% or whatever, just under market value to get a quick sale. And that's what I do. Okay, Renardo asks, can you please explain why Bitcoin seems to be tethered to the stock market? I don't know. I haven't really noticed that, Renardo, but I don't follow Bitcoin too much. I know that it's not really behaving like a digital gold like some people expected it to, but it's a in my mind, in my opinion, it's kind of a non-correlated asset. That's one of the benefits to Bitcoin. But I'm not a Bitcoin expert by any means. I kind of defer to other people. So I think that'd probably be my best answer there is I don't know anything that you've seen, excuse me, that makes it look like it's tethered to the market probably is just coincidence. I don't know that they're over long term that will play out. I think it's a non-correlated asset. Hopefully it's a non-correlated asset. Dariella, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. Dariella asks, thoughts on simple IRAs right now, not even close to retirement, but I'm curious, scared to lose the money. I'm not the guy to ask about our IRAs, excuse me. I'm thinking for Rebel Capitalist Pro, what I might do is try to get an expert in there on IRAs to kind of answer a lot of these questions, because I know it's applicable to so many of my viewers. Also, maybe even just for the Rebel Capitalist show, to get some people on that are really familiar with IRAs to give you some better advice. I hate to say do this, do that, because I've never had an IRA. I haven't been, I haven't been an employee. I haven't had a 401k, none of that stuff. I've been an employee, but it hasn't been, I mean, it's been almost 20 years. So I've always just done all that I've done all of that myself. As far as, I mean, if I had an IRA, let's say, where I could only invest in stocks or bonds, I mean, what would I do? I'd probably be in T-bills right now, and I'd just be holding a lot of dry powder. And hopefully you don't get a big shot of inflation. See, the problem is consumer goods are most likely going to go up, in my opinion. And again, no certainties, only probabilities. I think the probability is high that consumer prices go up over the next year, which means you're basically losing purchasing power if you've got cash. Oh, this is what I would do. I would watch the last two. Actually, here, I'm thinking through this. Sorry, guys. I'm sitting here stuttering here like a fool. I would go and read Chris Cole's paper on the Dragon portfolio. And it's free. Just Google Chris Cole Dragon portfolio, or the name of the paper is The Allegory of the Hawk and Serpent. So you just have to type in your email address real quick. You download the PDF. It's a very easy read. The thrust of the paper is just maybe 20 pages. You can scan it over an hour or two. I would start to ask myself, okay, how can I construct this IRA? You can't do it exactly, but how can I construct it to mimic the spirit of what Chris Cole is talking about with this Dragon portfolio as much as possible? And even if you can't buy physical gold, you could buy a fund like my buddy Rick Rules, who was Sprott. And it's called his is PHYS, I believe. And I don't like it as much as physical gold, but I think it's a decent. I think it's probably the best alternative if you're looking for just that insurance policy for 10% of your portfolio. It's obviously they own the underlying asset, gold. It's held at the Canadian Mint, and the custodian for the fund is the Canadian Mint themselves. Compare that to GLD, where the custodian is HSBC. I'd prefer to put my counterparty risk with the Canadian Mint. And then as far as Rick, I mean, I've interviewed Rick. I really trust him. And I've told the story a couple times that when I interviewed Rick, he was just such a nice dude. He's so cool, so nice, very humble, as you guys know. When you're talking to him, when you're not recording, he's the exact same way as he is what you guys see when he's doing interviews. And even after the interview, I told the story before, but in case you guys haven't heard it, his assistant reached out to me via email and said, "Oh, by the way, could we get your physical address?" And I thought that was kind of weird. I'm like, okay, well, the first thing that came across my mind is like, man, I hope I didn't do something wrong. Like, what did I do? What did I do? But so I gave him my sister's address because I'm in Colombia. She's in the States. And so Rick actually sent me a box of like really high end chocolate just as a thank you for having him for inviting him on my show, on the Rebel Capitalist show. And I mean, I know that's old school, but it's like the little things like that make you form an opinion on the trustworthiness of an individual. And I just that really, you're like, wow, okay, that I think is a great window into Rick's personality and how great of a guy he is. So if I've got to go into a gold fund, just for me personally, it's going to be the Sprott fund, just because because I trust Rick. And then I like the fact that that the custodian is the Canadian Mint. So and that may be an option for your IRA, but that's where I'd start. And then what I do after you read Chris Cole's paper is go back and watch the last two educational series I did with Patrick. And I know it's on options, but I don't think you can do options with the IRA. Maybe you can, but you probably can't. But at least it gives you the idea of what they're trying to achieve. And then maybe you can think of a way to achieve that in a way that fits within your IRA. That's probably the best advice I can give you. That's what I would do if I had an IRA that was limited like that. I'd try to set it up to mimic the Dragon portfolio as much as possible. Okay, guys, just going down here, getting the next question. Oh, boy, that's the thing on my end with these questions. It's like There's no questions, and then like 50 of them pop up at one time. It's like the live chat just throws them out in blocks or something. I know, MJ, you've asked this. Let's see. Have you heard of a Cambria tail risk ETF? If you, I have not. Oh, here's an easy question. T3 asks, oh, shoot, I lost it. There it is. Oh, actually, I think I can show these. Oh, there we go. Yeah. Cool. I remember Sebastian telling me that I could just click on them and show them on the screen. All right. Should we invest in Canadian real estate? No. Easy answer. Does it have a same effect as USA? What is your opinion? I wouldn't touch Canadian real estate with a 10-foot pole. It's like Aussie real estate, unless you could somehow find a seller that's just so motivated, or who knows, drunk or on drugs or something like that, that would sell to you at a cheap price, or where you could get a 1% RV ratio. But I wouldn't. I just think you got too much headwind there. You got to buy cheap. There's nothing cheap about the Canadian real estate market. Let me see if I can put it back. Ah, there we go. Cool. That's easy enough. Okay, so we got that one. I apologize for the delay, guys. I'm just trying to find that. Okay, here we go. Leah asks, thoughts on buying investment properties in Texas? I like Texas, Leah. If I was in the States, if I had to be in the States, I would definitely go to a state like Texas or Arizona, or maybe Florida, Nevada, something that's kind of out of the crazy states. And I'm, as you guys know, I'm not political. I dislike both parties equally. But the bottom line is, if you're in a heavy Democratic state right now, ooh, my goodness. I mean, you really want to be in one of these, close to one of these, what do they call them? Autonomous zones. I mean, you want, seriously, you want to buy a rental property, and next thing you know, it's taken over by Chaz or whatever the stupid acronym is. Like, you want a Chaz zone popping up right next to your house? Like, no thanks. Like, no way. And the likelihood of them having an autonomous zone or Chaz set up in Texas is pretty darn slim. if you've ever been to Texas, can you imagine like the hipsters and Antifa folks trying to set up an autonomous zone? I don't mean to laugh at that, but man, what a contradiction. There'd be some fireworks there for sure, wouldn't there? So yeah, if I've got to invest in the States, I like places like that, or even living, for heaven's sakes. Boy, I mean, just compare living in like California to Texas. No brainer. As far as, but then it always goes back to numbers, Leah. It's I don't like looking at places, and I don't like analyzing places from the ground up first, saying, oh, I think they've got, I don't like looking at things like a normal real estate investor. So like, okay, Texas has all these tailwinds. You're going to have a lot of population coming into Austin over the next week. They're doing the next 5 years, they're doing all this building. The jobs are this, it's blah, 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 blah. So yeah, it's a great time to buy. I don't start there. What I do is I just look at the inflation adjusted numbers for, let's say, Dallas, going back as far as I can find them. That's where I start. And then I look at my rents and I say, okay, can I get a 1% RV ratio here? then once I figure all that out, and assuming the answer is yes, and also too, I want to ask myself if it's a linear market, which Texas tends to be more linear, not as linear as I'd like, but more linear than a lot of the high flyers or even the hybrid markets. So, but you get that out of the way, and then I start asking myself, okay, what neighborhood do I want to be in? And then, okay, with this little area, what's the job market looking like over the next 5 years? Is it most likely that I'm going to have a lot of demand for my property over the next 10, 15 years due to all of the things that most real estate investors talk about? It's just I don't start with those questions. I kind of end up at those questions after I've done all my macro research to come to the conclusion that that's an area where I want to be. So it just, again, it all starts with RV ratios. And if you can find, I know last time I almost bought it wasn't really a campground. It was down by San Antonio, Leah. I'm not sure where you are, but where was it? It was, I don't recall. You'd think it was about 1.5 million, and I was this close to buying it, so you'd think I'd remember. But it was actually back in like 2014 or so. That's why it's hard for me to remember. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It was just one of these. It was like 5 acres, and the guy built all these cabins, and people would rent the cabins to take their boat down to the lake and all these things. And it was a neat little business. And, but my point is I've got a lot of knowledge with the San Antonio area. And back then there were some really good RV ratios in San Antonio. Now, maybe not, but I like those types of areas. So I think hopefully that answers your question. I'd start by looking at those macro numbers and then kind of go down from there. But overall, I do like Texas. Anthony asks, hey, George, is rent to rent a good strategy to use in current property market post-COVID? Rent to rent. So I'm assuming what you're talking about, Anthony, is getting a long-term lease and then renting the property on Airbnb. So the guy that purchased the first flip I did in Medellin is a massive, like 6,000 square foot penthouse. That was his business. He would go in and lease properties. He'd do a 10-year lease on a residential property. He was doing these mansions up in Cartagena. He'd also do it with a hotel. But his main business was with these giant, like 10-bedroom mansions up on the coast of the Caribbean. And he would rent them, do a 10-year lease for like $4,000 US a month. And then he'd rent them on Airbnb for $1,000 a night. And he was crushing it. He was crushing it. Now, of course, COVID, he probably had a big setback because he's probably didn't have any income for the last few months, although he still has these lease payments. But listen, he made so much money from over the last 4 years doing that a year of no rents, it isn't even going to phase him. So I'm assuming you're talking about doing something like that, in which case I think it's a great strategy. I think it's fantastic. You kind of turn into a property management company. It is basically a property management company, but just 1,000 times better, because a property management company is a terrible business. Their margins are horrible, but it's like it's like getting into a super high profitable property management business. So it's definitely not passive, that's for sure. So that's what I'd warn. If you're looking for a passive investment, that is not it. But if you're looking to like build a business, then yeah, I think it could be great. Okay, Rich asks, what would have to happen that would make you want to renounce your U.S. citizenship? I think the first thing that would have to happen, Rich, is the contract I have with Puerto Rico would have to, there would have to be a change to the contract I have with Puerto Rico. Because when you do Act 20, 22, or now it's called Act 60, you have like a 20-year contract, I think it's 20 years, with Puerto Rico, where they will not raise your taxes. You're like locked in for this time frame. And if they reneged on the deal somehow, which I don't expect they will, but if they did, and while at the same time, like well, there we go. If Puerto Rico becomes the 51st state, or now the 52nd, they're trying to make they're trying to make DC a state. So if Puerto Rico becomes a state, then that contract is kaput. And so I'm not saying I would definitely renounce my U.S. citizenship, but that would be the first catalyst to make me consider it seriously. Because I believe, especially if Biden gets in, that taxes are just going to become just craziness. Corporate taxes, long-term cap gains, they might not take the income too high, but they'll take it right back to 40%, call it, or 39.4, wherever it was with Obama. And I think they'll continue to take it higher. I don't want any part of that. I don't want zero part of that. And I don't like the direction the United States is going. I mean, look at what's happening with this rioting and looting and just the divisiveness. And it's crazy. It's really crazy. There's very little thought in the United States. All I see is raw emotion. And I don't like that at all. That's not the society I want to be a part of. But again, that wouldn't necessarily make me renounce my citizenship, because my family still lives there. And at the end of the day, I want to see my mom, I want to see my sister, I want to see my brother. So I think that's the best way I can answer your question. If Puerto Rico became the 51st state or 52nd state or whatever, that's, I think, the most probable way they would renege on that contract, the Act 22 and 20. And that's where it would get me thinking, okay, what's your next step, George? But what I would do in the interim, Rich, is I would get my second passport, which I'm in the process of doing in Colombia. And I'm considering getting a third passport, because the passports that you can buy in the Caribbean, like St. Kitts, Antigua, Grenada, a few of those, they're on sale right now, because all of these islands in the Caribbean that sell their passports. And by the way, those are some good passports. I think St. Kitts actually has visa-free travel to the U.S. So like right now, I don't spend more than 3 months a year in the U.S. So why not just renounce? If you had a passport that had visa-free travel to the U.S., there you go. You can still spend your 3 months a year in the States, even though you renounce. So that's like the steps I'm taking. I'm in the process of getting Colombia, and then I'm thinking about buying one in like a St. Kitts that, if my memory serves me right, has visa-free travel to the U.S. because they're cheap right now. They're on sale. They're like half price. So now's a good time to buy one, and then just keep it in your back pocket. You got it. You got a plan B and C. So then if this does come to fruition with Puerto Rico, then you've got options, and there's no downside to having options. Okay, guys, we've got an hour. Let me do a couple more questions and we'll wrap things up. Just as a reminder, if any of you guys are interested in Rebel Capitalist Pro, that's the new digital online product I started with Lynn Alden and Chris McIntosh. It's got their research. It's got live stream Q&As with Chris and Lynn and myself, where you guys can ask them your questions directly, just like this, in fact. And it's got an online forum with members that is just amazing. It'll blow your mind, the quality of content in there. And like I said in the little sales pitch I have on the page, I say it's one of the few places online that's actually a sane space. It's not a safe space. We don't like those. Those are for the people in Chaz, in the autonomous zones. They're the people that like the safe space. We just want a sane space online where you can interact with like-minded individuals and just be productive online instead of just waste your time arguing with all your Facebook friends. That doesn't do anything for your portfolio. Okay, Gabriel asked, what do you think about the real estate niche of affordable housing or group homes? With the model, you can rent per bed 10 times cash flow. Do you have any experience with this? I don't, but a lot of my friends do, because like in South America, that's a hostel, what you're talking about. It's not that you're talking specifically about a hotel or hostel, but it's the same business model, right? You're just renting out less and less per square foot or per square meter at a higher and higher price. And so I know guys that have made a lot of money with hostels with this exact same business model here in Colombia and in Ecuador. So I like the model for sure, but you got to keep in mind, Gabriel, you're not talking about an investment here. You're talking about a business. This is a business, and you've got to treat it like a business or you're not going to do well. If you treat it like some sort of passive investment, you're going to get your butt handed to you. So as long as you're looking at it like a startup in an actual business, kind of like a property management business, then I think you'll do well. And it's very interesting for sure. And honestly, if I was doing this in the States, I'd do it with Airstreams, man, or Shastas or canned hams. And just in case you guys don't know what the hell a canned ham is, they're these, and you can get a canned ham or a Shasta on eBay, like remodeled, like 10 grand. I mean, crazy. And now with the millennials and people that are just looking to rent an experience overnight, not necessarily just a Motel 6 or a Best Western hotel room, they would way rather rent a Shasta, for even if it's in your driveway. Like when I was in Tucson helping out my younger brother, a lot of people did that. They would get a really cool like Airstream, deck it out, remodel it, and then they'd put it in their driveway. They'd use it for their own purposes, but when it was in their driveway, they'd rent it out on Airbnb just like a hotel room, and they'd cash flow the RV that was sitting in their driveway. So I know this isn't your direct question, but your question is trying to figure out how you can increase your cash flow and maximize your ROI. And I think that's a great way to do it as well. And it's cheap too. I mean, again, when we get done with this, and after you get done watching Lynn's interview on the Investor Podcast, go to eBay and look at these Shastas and canned hams. They're the little RVs with the wings in the back. And when you look at it, you'll be like, oh, yeah, I know those. Yeah, those are totally cool. I really like those. And you can imagine all the people that would rent that out just so they could sit there and take pictures of themselves staying in the canned ham or the Shasta and put it up on Facebook and Instagram and tag all their friends. Oh, check it out where I'm staying. Yeah. And they pay you $100 a night for that. And you only paid 10 grand for the thing on eBay. And you don't even have to remodel it. That's after it's been remodeled. So those are the types of opportunities I would look for personally if I was in the United States. And I'd start with one canned ham or an Airstream in my driveway. Then I'd do maybe two I put one in my backyard or put one in my buddy's driveway. And then once I got good and I figured out the game and I became like a super host or whatever, dude, I'd buy a property, man. I'd buy a property in some area that has a lot of tourists, like 5 acres, and put 10 Airstreams on there. That's what my buddy's doing near the Grand Canyon. That is a business model. And it's basically a hotel where you've got a lot less maintenance, got a lot less customer service, but your ROI is through the roof because you can charge so much. Basically, you got to look at a canned ham or an Airstream as a hotel room. So do the math. Do the math on an Airstream and what you could charge for a rent as far as the total cost of getting a remodeled Airstream or doing it yourself if you're handy. And then do the math on your ROI that compared to a normal hotel room, even in a franchise hotel room like a Hilton or a Best Western. You're going to see that your ROI on the Airstream, if you know what you're doing, is going to be much, much higher. And plus you own the land, and then you're building a little business that in 5 years you can sell at a 5-6 times multiple. If I was in the States, that's what I'd be doing. And well, if I was in the States, I'd do that, and I would turn my project into a YouTube channel. I would document the whole thing and use the YouTube channel to advertise the campground, the Airstream campground. There you go. Okay, going to the... Okay. Oh, shoot, I lost it. Oh, there it is. Let me put it up on the thing here so I don't lose it. Okay, Priam asks, the equity portion of the Dragon portfolio appears to be made up of U.S. equities. Thoughts on including emerging markets such as India, Russia into the mix? I think it's a great idea. I think it's a great idea. You've got to look at the Dragon portfolio and understand it conceptually, and then figure out how you can take your own research and apply it to the Dragon portfolio, or vice versa. And if I was setting up something like that, I would look at the equity component. Now, keep in mind, it's not going to be an exact Dragon portfolio, so you can't really take the numbers of going all the research Chris has done backdating the portfolio because he's used the U.S. equity markets. And you might not have the same correlation between U.S. volatility and Russian equities. So you're not really building a Dragon portfolio. But what I'm doing is I'd like to build a Dragon portfolio and use U.S. equities, but just not buy them now. Just wait to buy them when they're cheap, and then start the Dragon portfolio. So I'm in no rush to start my Dragon portfolio tomorrow. If the market goes down to all-time lows or crashes or whatever, then I'm going to look and say, aha, now I can get these equities cheap. And then I can build this around cheap equities from a starting point. Maybe that's, and also too, make sure that you watch the last, is either the first or the last educational series I did with Patrick on the Dragon portfolio, because he talked about using a different product other than bonds, just because bonds are so expensive right now. And how, unless we go into negative or so close to the zero bound, your risk reward on bonds just really isn't that great. So, but Patrick has another, it's not his, but he suggested another product that gives you the same type of exposure to bonds, but has a lot more upside because it's got a yield curve steepener in there. So this gal that set up the product did it with bonds, but also had a way through options to profit from the yield curve steepening. In other words, inflation going up. So I thought that was probably not right for all investors, but definitely something interesting to consider and even to think through to maybe apply to your own portfolio. Okay, I think that's going to do it, guys. We're about hour 15 minutes. I really appreciate it. Let me go through here and give some shout outs to everyone that stayed on till the very end. We've got Colin. Thank you very much. Brandon, thank you. Salvador, thank you. Mr. Ant or Mr. Rant or M Rant, I'm not sure. Atlas, thank you. MJ, Gerald, Addison, Arthur, Anonymous, Colin, Aurora, Josh, Tyrelli, David, Bloodbath McGrath. Oh, there's a good name as well. Ahmed, David Preston, Anthony Silver, Alex, Martin, Debbie, Christina, Alex N, James, Charlie, Paola, William, Alan. All right, guys. Thank you very much for staying till the end. If you guys want to check out Rebel Capitalist Pro, again, that's georgegammon.com/pro. Check it out today, and I will see you on the next video.